Hey everyone, welcome to another installment from Ampro Engineering. What we're looking at here is what was left of the front half of my Tamiya FF01. It was actually the first car I took out for a spin during lockdown, COVID lockdown, when that all started. And I went off the Ampro sidewalk jump, and there it is. The whole thing basically just broke loose of the chassis. I shouldn't say the chassis. And the bottom piece here started making a terrible noise. And then when I went to pull the trans out to take a look at what was going on, that. Needless to say, these parts are simply not available anymore. I have seen people make really nice replacement parts. However, they, from what I've seen, tend to want you to replace the whole chassis, and I didn't want to go down that path. So what I did is I made something which will allow you to throw the trash where it belongs and replace it with beautiful modeled parts. Now these are from Shapeways, so these are SLS Nylon. However, this is a rather costly print through Shapeways, so if you so choose, these are also available through my manufacturing, and you can print them with an FDM printer. I would not recommend a resin printer or an SLA. I just don't think the material is going to be capable of holding these stresses. So this is an extremely fast, and please ignore the surface finish. This was printed in this orientation just to do a test fit. But this is an FDM example, and mechanically it works fine. I just find it hideous. So you will want to print this with the resolution about as high as possible. And ultimately, it will in fact fit on the car. Now, again, this is all FDM. This is there for fitment purposes. So what we're going to do now is install the production version. So the main piece here definitely has that Tamiya look and feel. Just a few cosmetic details to give it a little bit of a uniqueness. Also, a great number of the holes are fully through. The reason this is good is because it's going to be a lot easier to tap the holes if you want to do that. This is not the case with all of them. There are some issues, like for example, this one here is not a through hole. And without making it kind of weird, it's not going to be possible to do that. You'll also notice the large hole, and this is for a 30mm fan. I figured, why not? The base piece looks quite similar to the factory Tamiya piece. However, there are some differences. This is actually a millimeter thicker, so you've got a little more of a skid plate. This has a little jog in it, and I went ahead and just flattened it out. And this is a result of FDM print. It's going to be a hell of a lot easier to just make this a flat surface than to have this rather minuscule jog on the bottom. So that's what's going on there. It also pulled the front end up a little bit off the ground because currently it kind of aims it a bit down more. So I wanted to do that. Otherwise, it will install exactly like the original one would. It just kind of goes in there. This bumper piece looks identical, but it is not. I have made a few changes to it. None of these parts are going to be compatible with any of the original parts, okay? There are some aftermarket bumpers I've seen. There's a possibility that these are going to fit, as a lot of the geometry of this part here is identical to the original. There are just some anomalies that I didn't really like on the original part. The gearbox cover is also quite different. The original actually used the shock tower to hold it in place. This does not. This has 3 holes that will thread it all down. You do want to make sure that the surface is nice and clean because, you know, you don't want to have any path to get goodies in there. So that goes straight on top. Finally, the shock tower is a little bit different. So the shock tower is now held down by these 2 standoffs, as well as these 2 holes, the closer ones here at the rear. It just goes straight down on top. Factory shocks, factory body mounts are going to bolt right on there. These are going to have to be drilled afterwards. I think these are like 3.8. They're very peculiar size. These have to be done undersized because you can't maintain those kind of tolerances on one of these walls with a 3D printer. I want to make this finished. So I'm going to pull everything you see here off, and then we're going to get to assembling. So the front half of the car is disassembled, and we'll start. I probably think we should start by putting in the gears. And again, just want to show you some of the evolution. I've got, boy, it's ignore the colors. I'm just trying to finish off some of the material on the printer. But basically, all of this work was to fine-tune the little details on this. It's quite hard to see, but I mean, even getting the geometry correct to get the motor to go from its minimum to its largest pinion size was quite difficult. The angle back here was odd. You can see that in earlier versions I had to cut this down, then I forgot to modify it, so I had to cut it down again. Then you have these over here that have been modified. So it's gone through a number of iterations. This will just drop straight in here. Good. So it's good when it does. Remember that this is the final production model that I've developed, and I've not tested it. So you're watching this video assuming that this is going to work, but I'm assembling this hoping that it's going to work. All right, so those two are in. Okay, that's a plus. They're spinning. We'll set this down on top. And once again, pray that they're spinning, and they are nicely. So we're going to use, I'm just going to snag these 3 screws. These are, I think, 10 millimeter long screws. And as I mentioned earlier, the threaded holes have been drilled out because I did want to make sure that there was no extra support material or any other schmutz inside of those. So that's closed. This SLS Nylon, if you do use SLS Nylon, is really, really good with these self-tapping screws. And what I like to do, and this will work in FDM as well, when you thread these in, go ahead and just go back and forth a couple times. What this does is it very, very nicely cuts the plastic so that it's under less stress. There you go. Normally the gearbox would hold the front of the shock tower down. There's a little tab that sticks underneath. That's no longer the case here. That is completely standalone. All right, flipping this over, we now have the differential assembly. This can only go in one orientation. Push it all the way in. And is it all the way in? Nope, all the way in. So we can see now. Sweet. That's spinning. That's what I like to see. Remember that when you are installing this, if you are printing from an FDM, you will likely have some fraying or residue in some areas. You do want to make sure that these areas are nice and clean. This is a flange right here. So this actually does stick off. It's not like extra material. Just make sure that all of the critical mating faces are nice and tidy. The part I always forget is the motor heatsink. Now this is not a factory, pardon me, this is not a standard part on the Tamiya FF01. I believe this was a hop-up option. So that'll go right there. And you got that little hole, see that there? That'll help you determine your gear mesh. This should fit both gears. I did have a reference to the larger one, so this should fit both of the larger optional gears. Okay, so that is in there. There's also a cover. This will go right in there. And we'll just put a screw in that. All right, so this will go this orientation. So that goes in like that. You see there's ample clearance for that heatsink. Do remember that you want to drill these out nice and clean. Otherwise, the A-arm U bracket, I guess I'll call it, will not appropriately fit. This part is always a hoot. So those go in like this. Or not. Come on, you can do it. I know you can do it. All right, so that's in place. On the other side, this little notch here is what prevents this from backing out if you were curious. Just slot that in. Come on, you can do it. Okay, just like that. All right, and whatever screws you pulled out of your original, send them right back through. I have both halves of the transmission assembled, and I've gone ahead and installed that 30 millimeter fan. You can also go with a stock style that doesn't have that. Next, we'll put the shock tower on. Mine happens to have the optional, I guess, shoulder bolt with the threaded ball end there. If you've got the variant with the standard shoulder bolt, you're probably going to want to install those on there first, partly because it's impossible to put this one on because this is in the way. Maybe I should have done a notch. I'm going to use these silver M3 self-tapping screws that are 10 millimeters long. They seem to work great, and they're pretty common on modern Tamiyas. So there's 2 there and 2 there in the back. I went ahead and put the body mounts on. Now the body mount screw hole is 3.2 or so. So just use your machine screw and then put the serrated lock nut on the rear. I'm going to go ahead and put these on, and then we can put on the tie rod for the front uprights. For the shocks, I'm going to use, again, the exact same stuff that it came with originally. I wanted to point something out as well. These are universal drive shafts, and I think they're from the TA02. I cannot recall. But I noticed that on my gearbox, my original, you can see how worn down that little area is. And that is a result of the pins here on the dog bone being a lot longer than the factory one. So what we're looking at here is a total length of 12, we'll call it 0.1. However, on the factory ones, I've got two of them here. We'll grab this one. We are just about 2.5 millimeters less in diameter. So that is the reason why this particular dog bone is hitting the gearbox. I have thinned out this area to a 0.8 millimeter wall thickness to give it as much clearance as possible, but there's still not enough room. Reducing that thickness even more will make potential problems during the print, and I believe the Shapeways print has a minimum wall thickness of 0.6, so I don't want to go beyond that. As a result, my recommendation would be to grind down the ends, if you have this particular one, down to a more reasonable 9.5 millimeters of total length, and then you shouldn't have any issues. This is also the ball differential variant. I've been told that the out drives are slightly different. I do not know if that means there'll be any issues in here in terms of clearance, but I did want to point that out. I do not have the gear drive version. So now that the gearbox is all squared away, we can basically take this and attach it to the front of the chassis. Once again, you're going to want to use all the original screws. So we'll just kind of align all this. Don't expect this thing to drop down easily. I made it nice and snug because I did want to, there it goes, to make sure it went on. Okay, so there you go. Just use the same screws for these two, the two on the bottom, and the fifth one there. So we've got the front bulkhead installed now. Feels, well, just about like the original one did. Can't say that it doesn't provide any additional rigidity, but it's on there. I reattached my steering tie rods, and we should be good now to throw the motor in, although we could have put it in previously. This has been designed and engineered to work with the original Tamiya heatsink. This is the plate that distributes the heat from the motor, from the face of the motor, beneath the transmission, and up to this heatsink. So that is going to go straight on in there. Well, it should. Anyway, there it goes. Secondly, this is the little cap that, as I showed earlier, will allow you to see the gear mesh right in there. I'm going to try and enlarge it because I can. That's kind of the cool thing here, is I can make that almost 20 to 30% bigger, which would be kind of cool. Anyway, at this point, we'll go ahead and install the motor. This is intended to work with the pinions available for the FF01 and no others. In the event you've got a smaller or larger one installed, there is a likelihood that the motor will not have enough travel to engage with the spur gear. So even if it works on yours, there's a possibility it won't fit. I simply, due to having to raise the motor up because it did sit a little bit lower on the original model, we did lose a bit of space. I'm going to put in my original race prep, and I think this has got a 24 tooth pinion. Right, you can see you see the mesh right there. So that's perfect. There's a little bit of play in there. I think it's time to reattach the wires, put the wheels back on, and bring this car back to life. So the car is wired up again. And for the first time in probably 4 years, that is just silky as can be. We're not out of the woods yet. We need to fit the body. Designing this shock tower was quite tricky because the shock tower actually leans back slightly. It's hard to tell, but it does have a slight angle rearward. And on top of that, the front body mounts also mount with a slight angle. You can see that, probably see it actually better on the original. This is not flat. And as a result, it took me calculating 2 angles to end up getting the body mount vertical. The reason why this is so important is because if this is at any kind of an angle, it can actually pull the body forward or backward. So what I've done, this is a Ford Mondeo, is I have taken the manual over here and checked the placement of the body pins. So you can see here at the rear, they're mounted third from the bottom, or pardon me, fourth from the bottom. At the front, they're second from the top. Now this is not normally how I run the car, but I did want to ensure that with the body in the proper ride height, that the wheels lined up. So let's do that. Okay, so here is the car. Here is the body. Although I hate how the vehicle sits, that's where it should sit. So if we turn the wheel in, so turn left, turn right, all the appropriate clearance. There it is, that's how it should sit. Now, usually I've got the front at 2 pins downward, not 1. So let's go down back there. And this is how I typically run the car. So there you go. Still sits kind of low at the back. There it is. Let's take your first spin. I will admit that I miss driving this car. It has been years since I've been able to. So now that I've got a gearbox, I plan on racking up lots more miles on this car. What I did want to mention and be very clear about is that this gearbox was intended to be a standalone product. If you have various other aftermarket parts, like an aftermarket tower, or perhaps aluminum parts for the transmission intended for the original, this will not accept them. It was never intended to. This whole design was intended to work as a unit being 3D printed. Based on some perhaps differences on your vehicle, if perhaps maybe my body mounts are somehow worn out and bent. I mean, they're obviously a little scratched. I'm only able to test these components on my vehicles. So if you do see some kind of anomaly, some issue, either in this video or perhaps when you receive your product, please let me know as soon as possible so that I can remedy it. One thing I wanted to mention as well is I do not own any of the FRP chassis for this vehicle, and as a result, I'm unable to do any kind of definitive testing. But if there is a chassis that the factory transmission bolted onto, it will likely bolt onto whatever that alternative one is. Also, something to note, these front shock towers, these are printed in SLS Nylon, but if you're going to print these in FDM, my early print, I don't know why I did this, I printed it roughly in this orientation here. And as a result, when I sent the parts off to Joshua at RC Everyday, they split immediately upon threading them in. So when you print something like this with a circular cross section, you effectively want to print it kind of in this orientation, right? So that the cylindrical body has the nozzle traveling like this and will dramatically increase the rigidity. I am absolutely thrilled how great this thing came out. I've already been driving the heck out of it, doing a lot of testing. And speaking of testing, I have to thank, again, Joshua over at RC Everyday. He went miles above and beyond anything I could have expected. He installed several of the gearboxes. He had early versions. He had later versions. He actually helped me discover that, and you can see this on his video, one of the mounts for the gearbox actually it was too long for his. And that was an early problem that another tester had noticed. I would also like to thank Tice from Shapeways, who tested all of my beta parts and was the first person to say, you've screwed up the transmission mount to the chassis. And fortunately, that's all sorted. So that was a huge help. And finally, to make everything of mine look good, of course, we have Michael Platypus, who makes everything just beautiful. Currently, what he's got is stuff for shelfers, but he did point out to me that when he was building his NOS, that clear front end for one of his shelf queens that's never been on the ground, he told me that the rear bulkhead on his is also decomposing. And I said, that's weird because mine's not. And no, it is. It is. So I've glued it all back together, and you'll be seeing this car again because next we're going to fix the back half of the FF01. thank you all so much for watching. This has been a very, very long ongoing project that, again, I could not have done without Joshua at RC Everyday, Michael Platypus, and Tij just going above and beyond to help me test all these parts. Remember that links are in the description. Links are in the description, and we will see you next time.